It was a few months ago when I decided to move to this quiet suburban neighborhood. I hoped a slower pace would help me find my creative spark. The beige houses and overgrown lawns looked normal to me. I thought I would settle in and find peace. On my third night, I woke up to whispers coming from the walls. At first, I thought it was just my neighbors. Maybe the walls were thinner than I realized. But the whispers didn't stop. They kept me awake, pulling me from sleep. I tried to forget it during the day, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Days passed and the whispers grew louder. I thought I could make out some words, but they were just out of reach. I saw my neighbor, Mrs. Bowers, outside her house. She sat on her porch, always watching me. I felt uneasy. Her eyes followed my every move like I was a specimen under a microscope. It wasn't just curiosity, it felt wrong. One evening, I heard laughter outside. I peered out my window, expecting to see kids playing, but the street was empty. A chill ran through me. It felt too quiet. I shook my head, telling myself that my mind was playing tricks. Weeks went by and odd things kept happening. I wanted to talk to Mrs. Bowers about it, but when I did, she smiled and said, "You'll get used to the sounds." I felt that smile creep over me. What did she know? I wanted answers, but I felt more paranoid each day. My sleep got worse. I began to see shadows in the corners of my vision. Once, when I was alone in my living room, I felt something cold brush against my arm. I jerked away, my heart racing. I questioned everything. The whispers? My imagination? Then one night, I was just staring at the wall, and I heard a voice. It said my name. I froze. Who was calling me? I turned to the dark living room, and again I heard those children's laughs. But there was no one around. I couldn't stop thinking about it. What was happening in this neighborhood? What were my neighbors hiding? I wanted to know, but fear gripped me. One afternoon, I saw Mrs. Bowers in her garden. Feeling a surge of determination, I approached her. "What do you know about those whispers?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Her smile widened. "Things like that happen here," she replied, her tone cheerful yet unsettling. I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Why do you say that?" I pressed. There was an air of secrecy, a truth hidden beneath her words. "Just listen," she said softly, her eyes sparkling in a way that made my skin crawl. I felt that unease settle in my stomach. I didn't know what to do. I looked into her eyes and saw something I couldn't understand. I felt like I was standing on a cliff, looking down. Into darkness. The whispers grew louder in my mind, echoing against the silent walls. I took a step back, my heart pounding. "I have to go," I said, wanting to escape her gaze. I hurried inside my house, but her voice followed me. "Remember to listen, Clara," she called, her smile unwavering as I shut the door. I leaned against it, catching my breath. What had I uncovered? What was going on here? The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I tried to forget Mrs. Bowers's words, but they echoed in my mind. Just listen. What did that even mean? I decided I had to be brave. I couldn't live in fear, not in this house. I stepped outside, determined to get some clarity. The sun was high, lighting up the street, but something felt off. It was too quiet. The familiar sounds of children playing were absent. I walked around the block, hoping to find someone who could help. I walked past the neighboring houses, noting how they seemed perfectly maintained, as if nobody lived in them. I approached another neighbor's home, the Johnsons. They were known for their lively family gatherings, but today there were no voices, no sounds of laughter. I knocked on the front door. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. I turned away, my heart beginning to race. That's when I noticed something near the edge of their yard. A small, weathered swing, swaying slightly, as if someone had just gotten off. It felt wrong. like a child had been there but had vanished. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I hurried back home, my mind racing. I decided to dig through my boxes. Maybe I could find my notebooks or something to occupy my mind. As I rummaged through my things, I came across my old journal. I flipped through the pages, noting my past struggles with inspiration and anxiety. But then I found a drawing that stopped me in my tracks. It was an old sketch I had done years ago of children playing. They all wore strange smiles, with eyes far too big for their faces. The laughter I had heard echoed in my memory. I shuddered, putting the journal aside as a wave of nausea hit me. Later that night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The whispers returned, swirling in my mind like a fog, intangible yet loud. Then, just as I was about to drift off, I heard it again. My name, Clara. The voice was different this time, softer and almost pleading. In a moment of desperation, I sprang from my bed, feeling the cold air bite at my skin. I moved toward the wall, pressing my ear against it, hoping to hear more. The whispers thickened, a chorus of echoes wrapping around me. I could almost make out words, but they slipped away just as I was about to grasp them. Then I noticed something strange. Faint outlines shimmered on the wall, like a shadow moving just below the surface. My heart raced. I backed away, tripping on the edge of my rug and nearly falling. Breathing heavily, I glanced at the window. That's when I saw them. Shadows moving outside. Dark figures darting along the street, too quick to be human. I blinked, trying to focus, but they vanished as soon as I looked at them directly. My chest tightened with panic. I darted back to the door and peered out through the peephole. The street was empty again, no signs of life. The only sound was my heavy breathing. I slammed the door shut, locking it tightly. They weren't just whispers anymore. They were something real, something lurking in the dark. I needed to figure out what was happening, but I also knew I had to be careful. Who or what was out there, and what did they want from me? Just then, my phone buzzed on the table. A message lit up the screen. "Remember to listen, Clara." The hairs on my neck stood on end. I felt like I was being drawn deeper into their web. What had I gotten myself into? I hardly slept that night. When dawn broke, it felt like the shadows still clung to me, pressing into my thoughts. I forced myself to get up and made some coffee. The smell of it filled the air, comforting but bland against the unease that had settled in my stomach. I knew I couldn't just hide in my house. I took a deep breath and decided to confront whatever was happening. I grabbed a notebook and a pen from my cluttered table. If I could document what I encountered, maybe it would help me make sense of it. I stepped outside, the chill of early morning air brushing against my skin. The neighborhood looked the same as before, but there was an unsettling stillness. I decided to visit Mrs. Bowers first. If anyone could shed light on what was going on, it would be her. As I approached her house, I noticed the curtains were drawn tight. I knocked and waited, hearing nothing. My heart sank, but I felt compelled to keep trying. I knocked again, louder this time. Then I noticed a small garden gnome cracked in half on her porch, like something had collided with it. "Mrs. Bowers?" I called, my voice barely breaking through the stillness. No answer. Feeling foolish, I turned to leave when I heard it. A soft giggle, just around the corner. My instinct screamed at me to run, but I was drawn by curiosity. I walked toward the sound, only to be met by a group of children, 3 of them, standing in a neat little line. They were dressed in brightly colored outfits, their eyes wide and glittering. "Hi," one of the girls called out, her smile too big, too wide. "Wanna play?" I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. "Where are your parents?" I stammered. The question felt weak, but something in me instinctively knew it was important. "They're busy," the boy replied, his voice too calm, almost rehearsed. "We're just having fun." I noticed that their laughter sounded hollow, like it was echoing from somewhere far away. "Maybe I should get your mom's," I said, the words slipping out before I could think better of it. The kids didn't react to my suggestion. Instead, they took a step closer, and I backed away instinctively. My heart pounded. Were they even real? Their skin looked so pale, and their smiles seemed glued in place. "Just listen," the girl said, her voice a haunting melody. "Games are more fun when you listen." I turned and ran, fear clenching my chest. I didn't stop until I was back home, the door slamming shut behind me. I leaned against it, gasping for breath. What had I just seen? I pulled out my notebook and started jotting down what had happened. The strange children, if that's what they were, felt tied somehow to whatever threat lingered in the air. As I wrote, my fingers trembled. Then I heard it again, a whisper, soft yet insistent. "Clara, please." My throat went dry. It was time to find out who this voice belonged to, and whatever awaited me, I had to confront it head on. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As I peered through the window, shadows flickered past again. This time they stopped, hovering almost as if they were waiting for me. The air felt charged with something I couldn't understand. I took a deep breath, ready to step into the unknown. Whatever was out there wasn't going to let me ignore it any longer. I opened the door, adrenaline rushing through my veins. The whisper was still in my ears, a haunting pull that drew me outside. I stepped into the quiet, unsettling atmosphere once more. The shadows seemed to pulsate in the dim light, as if acknowledging my presence. I decided to walk down the street, my instincts guiding me toward Mrs. Bauer's house again. I half expected to see the children lurking, but the street was deserted. I approached her porch slowly, hoping maybe I could catch a glimpse of her through the window. As I leaned closer, something caught my eye. A scrap of paper lay near the cracked gnome. I picked it up, my hand shaking. It was a drawing, a crude sketch, but unmistakable. In the center, a tall figure towered over a group of smaller, shadowy shapes, reminiscent of the children I had just seen. The figure wore a wide grin, equal parts friendly and sinister. Beneath it, scribbled words read, "Follow the games." Cold dread washed over me. What did this mean? Was Mrs. Bowers involved in something darker? As I clutched the paper, the whispers became clearer. "Clara, come play." I turned to leave, but a movement from the corner of my eye made me freeze. Children were there, stepping out from the shadows like they had been waiting for me. Their expressions hadn't changed, smiles still plastered on their faces, but this time their eyes gleamed with something sharper. "Why don't you play with us?" the girl asked again, tilting her head. I swallowed hard, my heart racing. "What do you want?" My voice wavered, fear gnawing at my mind. They didn't seem to hear me. They continued to inch closer, shifting between one another like a pack of wolves preparing to pounce. "Just a game," the boy said, his smile stretching impossibly wide. "It'll be fun." Panic surged through me. I turned and dashed back toward my house, a primal fear propelling me forward. The whispering intensified, drowning out everything else. They were right behind me. I could feel their cold presence brushing against my back. The air was thick, and I stumbled through my front door, slamming it shut. I leaned against it, breathless and trembling. The whispers quieted, but dread still settled heavily in my chest. I flipped the drawing over, searching for any hint of meaning. On the back, more words were scrawled. "It's your turn now." What did that mean? My mind raced with fear and confusion. I rushed to the window and peeked outside. The street was empty, but a sense of unease hung in the air. They were gone, but I knew they wouldn't be for long. I had to find out where this all connected. What was happening to the neighborhood? Gathering my courage, I pulled out my notebook again. I needed to document everything, every encounter, every strange moment. As I began writing again, another chilling thought hit me. What if there were more, hidden in the shadows? Then something rattled at the back door. A slow, deliberate scraping sound that sent a shiver down my spine. They had come back. I held my breath, knowing I could no longer ignore whatever game they wanted to play. I pressed my back against the door, listening intently. The scratching persisted, rhythmic and haunting. I felt time stretching, each second longer than the last. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat urging me to act. I glanced at the clock. It was almost midnight. What in the world was I supposed to do? I felt trapped. They were playing their game, and I was stuck in the middle. Gathering my thoughts, I reached for my phone, ready to call for help, but the signal faltered. Dead. I was utterly alone. The scraping paused, and I held my breath, straining to hear if they had abandoned their assault. A silent moment crept in, wrapping me in anxiety. Just as I began to feel a flicker of hope, a sudden crash on the back door made me jump. The sound reverberated through my bones, echoing my own dread. "Let us in, Clara!" A chorus of excited voices called from the other side. I couldn't respond. I wanted to yell
back, to ask them what they wanted, but fear silenced me. I darted to the kitchen, seeking anything I could use for protection. My eyes landed on the kitchen knife, and I grabbed it, feeling its cold blade against my palm. Just then, the door rattled violently, and I froze, the metallic taste of fear filling my mouth. Then, everything went black. The power cut out, plunging the house into darkness. Panic flared in my chest as I groped around, heart racing. I flicked the knife back and forth, searching for a hint of light, but nothing came. The whispers returned, louder and overlapping, as if they were inside the house now, echoing off walls. "Come out and play," they chanted, a twisted lullaby luring me closer. A sudden pounding filled the air. It came from the walls, the floors, and my own heart. Reality felt slippery, like I was losing my grip on what was real. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out their voices, but the chant turned into laughter, childish and mocking. I stumbled back, crashing into a table, and the knife slipped from my hand. Somewhere above me, a light flickered back to life, casting feeble shadows in the chaos. I opened my eyes to see a sliver of moonlight pouring through a window. In that fleeting glow, I caught movement just beyond the glass, shadowy figures darting between the trees across the yard. Had they moved outside? My pulse quickened as I peered closer. There were more of them now. They congregated near the gnarled oak, their heads thrown back in laughter, as if they were sharing a secret I couldn't fathom. Suddenly, a figure broke from the rest and dashed toward my house. Its outline was barely defined, but I recognized that grin from the drawing. The moment I realized what was happening, the back door burst open, slamming against the wall, and the child stood there, smiling with a gleeful glint in his eyes. "Your turn, Clara," he shouted, and a wave of vertigo hit me. I took a step back, dread pooling in my stomach. What did they want from me? Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something glimmering on the floor. It was the knife. I reached for it instinctively, heart racing, knowing I couldn't hide anymore. But before I could gather my wits, my phone buzzed to life on the table, illuminating the darkness. I glanced at it, only to find a text from an unknown number. "We're ready for you, Clara. Come find us." I looked back at the figure at the door, the laughter still echoing in my ears. I knew I was cornered, and I would have to confront whatever twisted game lay ahead. The child at the door didn't move. He just stood there, that twisted smile frozen on his face. And for a moment, I didn't know what to do. I could hear the laughter outside, the others beckoning me. I gripped the knife tightly, its cool handle grounding me in the suffocating darkness. "Your turn," he repeated, and I blinked, not understanding what he meant. Suddenly, the air felt heavier, and I could almost see their silhouettes congregating outside, a nightmarish assembly waiting for me. I thought about running, but the thought of darting past him sent a wave of nausea through me. They wanted me to come out. I could feel it. I shook my head, trying to muster my voice.
"What do you want?" The words slipped out, shaky but firm. His grin widened. "To play. We've been waiting." He tilted his head, almost curiously, as if I were an animal caught in a trap, waiting to be released. Something deep inside stirred at the simplicity of his answer. There was no malice in his tone, just eagerness, like all the enthusiasm of childhood fun wrapped in something sinister. I wanted to scream at him, to call him a monster, but the ache in my throat held me back. "Why?" I whispered, the question escaping before I could stop it. The child raised an eyebrow, and for an instant the laughter outside faded, replaced by a heavy silence. "Because you're special," he finally said, as if that explained everything. I glanced back at my phone, its screen still lit with that unsettling text, "Come find us." My mind raced. Who were they? What kind of game were they playing? The exit felt like a gaping maw, ready to swallow me. The urgency of the moment struck me again. I could either stay here, wallowing in fear, or I could face whatever awaited outside. The figures were shuffling in the darkness, but I couldn't tell if they were edging closer or pulling back. My heart pounded in time with the distant rhythmic laughter. Then something caught my eye, a small, dark shape moving toward the front of the house. I instinctively turned my attention back to the child at the door. "You need to leave," I said, my voice coming out stronger than I felt. "But we want to play," he pouted, and for a second I was taken aback by the innocence of his expression. Beneath the bravado of his chatter, there was a child longing for companionship. I grabbed the knife tighter. "I'm not interested," I said, forcing each word out with determination. A twinge of hesitation flickered in his eyes, and I seized the moment to bolt past him. My heart raced as I dashed toward the front door, adrenaline surging through me. The laughter erupted again, now louder and more urgent. I flung open the door, and the cold air hit me like a wave. The figures outside spun around, their faces obscured by shadows. But there were no children anymore. Just shapes dancing in the moonlight, swaying like leaves in a storm. What have I stepped into? "Clara!" a chorus rang, echoing all around me. I glimpsed the glimmer of eyes watching me, all full of anticipation. Then, like the snapping of a twig, something surged forward from the dark, a blur that struck the ground in front of me. I stumbled back, the knife slipping from my grasp. That's when I saw it. A torn piece of paper, stained and crumpled, lying in the dirt. My hand shook as I picked it up. It trembled in my grip, bearing a single word scrawled in frantic handwriting, "Join." And then a voice, low and ominous, whispered from behind, "Now you've annoyed them, Clara." I spun around, my pulse quickening. The voice was familiar, but it didn't belong to anyone I wanted to see. It was Kyle, a neighbor from down the street. He stood there, eyes wide, fear etched across his features. "What are you doing here?" I managed to ask, my voice wavering. The shadows loomed behind him, whispering and giggling. He looked over his shoulder, as if the darkness might swallow him whole. "I came to warn you. You shouldn't have come outside." He stepped closer, his hand outstretched. "We need to—" Before he could finish, a piercing scream sliced through the chill of the night. It came from the direction of the laughter. I swung around, my stomach churning, trying to locate the source. The figures danced erratically, their shapes momentarily illuminated by the moonlight. I took a step back, feeling trapped between the shadows and Kyle. "What's happening?" My voice was barely a whisper. He swallowed hard. "The games, they take people. You won't come back if they get you." The laughter grew louder, almost mocking. Confusion twisted inside me. What games? I had to force the words out, each syllable heavy with fear. Kyle hesitated, glancing back at the shadows. "I don't want to talk about it here." He grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the side of the house. "Come on." I didn't resist. The urgency in his voice pushed me to follow. We rounded the corner, putting distance between us and the laughter, the dark magic of the yard. But as we moved, I felt their presence shift, like a storm gathering strength. Once we were shielded by the house's wall, Kyle paused, panting as if he had run a mile. "They'll be looking for you. Why me?" the question burst out. I was tired of the uncertainty, fed up with running in circles. "Because," he breathed, "you've caught their interest. That kid at the door is one of them, and you crossed a line." I shook my head, desperate to make sense of it all. What line? This doesn't make any sense. "They're not like us, Clara. They only want to play, a twisted version of it. If they're bored, they might take you away." The edges of my vision blurred as panic surged within me. "Take me away? Where?" His expression turned grave. "No one really knows. But once you join—" He didn't finish. I pressed a hand to my mouth, fighting to push back. The rising tide of horror. I glanced at the darkness enveloping the yard, at the shapes that had once seemed harmless. "Stay quiet," Kyle murmured. "We need to wait it out until dawn. They're strongest at night." Just then, a low growl erupted from the shadows. The eerie sound sliced through the tense silence, making my heart race even faster. What was that? "Kai, we can't stay here," I whispered frantically. But my words fell on deaf ears. The growl came again, this time closer, as an ominous shape emerged from the shadows. Its eyes glowed, and it looked right at me. Then everything went dark. I gasped, the cold air flooding my lungs like ice water. I couldn't see anything, just a thick darkness all around. My heart pounded in my chest. Panic clawed at my throat. "Clara!" Kyle's voice broke through, frantic, pulling me back from the edge of dread. "Can you hear me?" I tried to respond, but my voice felt lost in the void. I reached out, searching for him in the pitch blackness, my fingers brushing against something cold and unyielding. The fear coiled tighter around me. "Kyle! I'm here!" He grabbed my wrist, his grip firm but shaky. "Stay close." Suddenly, the shadows flickered, as if they had a life of their own. I squinted, trying to make out anything, but the darkness pressed in. The growling noise had stopped, leaving an unsettling silence. "Do you see anything?" I whispered, my throat dry. "Not sure," he breathed back, still tightly holding on to me. "Just don't let go." Just then, I felt it, a shift in the air, heavy and unnatural. The shadows at the edges seemed to swirl, becoming thicker, denser. I shivered, feeling an otherworldly presence surrounding us. "Clara," Kyle said, quieter now, "do you remember what I told you about the games?" I nodded, though fear strangled my thoughts. "Yes." "We have to play along," he murmured. "It's the only way to get out." Before I could ask what he meant by that, the darkness erupted with a high-pitched laughter. It was clear and shrill, yet it echoed all around us. I clenched Kyle's hand tighter and pressed my back against the cold wall behind me. "I don't want to play," I cried out, fear surging in my chest. "Neither do I, but it's what they want. We have to—" A flash of light distracted me, illuminating a figure just beyond the shadows. I squinted, my breath catching. There it was again, and I could see the outlines of more shapes. They were there, watching us. "Please," I whispered, backing away, "don't come any closer." The laughter erupted again, sending chills down my spine. My heart pounded harder now. "What do they want?" I asked, desperate for answers. "They want you to play their game." Kyle's voice trailed off. I could hear the tremor in his tone. Suddenly, the lights flickered one last time, casting shadows in all directions. That's when I saw it. Something.
darting toward us, swift and purpose-driven. My pulse quickened. "Run!" Kyle shouted as he yanked me forward. We sprinted down the side of the house into the pitch black. I didn't know where we were going, just that we had to escape. As we reached the backyard, I stumbled, tripping over something hard. I fell to my knees, gasping. Kyle pulled me up, urgency in his voice. "We can't stop. They're coming." But just then, a chill crept over me. I turned back and froze. The figures in the darkness were no longer just watching. They began to move closer, shifting together like a living shadow. "We're not alone," Kyle whispered, his voice trembling. And I knew in that moment, whatever this game was, it was far from over. We dashed across the yard, the soft ground giving way beneath our feet. I could hear muffled whispers now, growing louder, inching closer like an ominous tide. I looked back, but the shadows were too thick to make out anything identifiable. "Clara, let's go to the shed," Kyle shouted. I could barely keep up as we veered to the left, desperate for anything that could shield us. The shed loomed ahead, a dilapidated structure barely visible in the dark. We pushed through the narrow door, the creaking sound echoing ominously as it closed behind us. I was hit by the smell of damp wood and rusted metal. We were safe, at least for the moment. I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. "Why?" I panted, looking at Kyle, whose eyes were wide with fear. "It's the only place they can't see us, at least not through the walls," he replied, his voice low. The realization hit me. Whatever was out there, they weren't human. "Do you think they'll come in?" I asked, my voice quivering. "I don't know," he admitted, glancing at the door like it would explode at any moment. Then the laughter returned, closer now, filling the shed like a thick fog. I clutched Kyle's arm tightly. "This isn't a game anymore," I whispered, my heart racing as images of sinister figures danced in my mind. Kyle nodded, eyes darting to the small window. "We have to find a way out," he said urgently. I turned to where old tools hung on the wall, glinting dully in the faint light. "What if we defend ourselves?" I suggested, my mind racing. I picked up a rusty wrench, feeling its weight in my hand. It was a poor choice, but it made me feel a fraction less vulnerable. "You think that'll scare them off?" Kyle said, a slight edge of hope in his voice. Before I could respond, the shadows outside grew deeper, swelling with a life of their own. Then there was a knock. It echoed, loud and deliberate, shaking the shed. "Kyle?" A voice taunted from beyond the door. It was smooth and chilling, sending chills up my spine. "Would you like to play with us?" "Clara?" I jumped at the sound, clutching the wrench like it was a shield against the encroaching darkness. "What do they want from us?" I whispered, my eyes wide. "There must be a way to—" Kyle started, but his words were cut off by another series of knocks. Each one felt like a countdown, a reminder of our impending fate. "Kyle, we can't stay here," I urged, but my body felt frozen. Fear wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. "On three, I'll open the door and we'll run," Kyle said, stealing a quick glance at the window. 1, 2. At that moment, the door rattled violently, and I could see dark shapes pressing against the wood, eager to burst in. 3, Kyle shouted, and he yanked the door open. For a split second, I could see them, figures cloaked in darkness, their faces hidden in the shadows. They were more terrifying than I imagined, their laughter sinking deep into my bones. "Run!" Kyle yelled, pulling me outside as panic surged. I sprinted, not knowing where we were headed, just desperate to escape whatever game we had unwittingly joined. As we tore through the yard, I felt something brush against my ankle. I looked down, and that's when I saw it, a small, glimmering object lying in the grass. My heart stopped. It was a broken piece of a mirror, jagged and reflecting a hint of light. "What is this?" I said, but Kyle didn't answer. He was too focused on the darkness closing in around us. "Clara, come on!" he yelled, urgency driving him forward. As I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that that shard was important. I clutched it tightly, knowing deep down that whatever this game was, it was far from over, and there was no way out without unraveling its twisted secrets. The shadows were everywhere, closing in around us like a suffocating mist as we dashed past the swaying trees. I could hear laughter echoing in the air, a haunting symphony of tiny voices taunting me, daring me to stop. Kyle's grip on my wrist tightened as we weaved between the looming shapes, our breaths heavy with desperation. "Where do we go?" I yelled over the cacophony. Panic clawed at my throat, each laugh a reminder of what was pursuing us. "To the trees!" he shouted, pointing ahead where the branches hung low and tangled, a thick barrier that might hide us from view. But before we reached the fragile cover, the laughter intensified, a sea of mockery swirling around us and chipping away at my sanity. As we ducked into the shelter of the trees, the darkness enveloped us. My heart pounded in my chest, every beat resonating with the dread that hung in the air. The shadows shifted outside, scrambling to get to us, but for now we were momentarily shielded from their gaze. "Why did you come after me?" I asked, breathless. "You could have just stayed away." Kyle didn't meet my eyes, staring into the gloom as if the darkness held answers. "I had to warn you. People have gone missing, Clara. Nobody talks about it, but those games, they're real. And if they get bored, they won't let you go." The gravity of his words anchored me. I had unwittingly stepped into a nightmare, but this sinister game stretched far beyond my life alone. I felt the weight of it pulling me into a dark void. "What can we do?" I whispered, panic rising again as the laughter grew closer. He grabbed my shoulders, urgency igniting in his eyes. "We have to take the fight to them. We need to end whatever it is, whatever spell they're under. They always want another player." A chill crept down my spine. "And how do we do that?" Kyle hesitated. "There's always a leader in their darkness. Often it's not a child, though they make you believe it is. We need to find the one guiding them." I nodded, but felt uncertainty gnaw at me. "How do we even know which one it is?" "We have to trust our instincts," he replied, glancing back toward the line of trees. "We feel it when they're close. Just listen." The idea felt ridiculous, but I had no choice. The whispers swirled with renewed vigor, pressing against me like a tide ready to pull me under. I closed my eyes, inhaling the sharp scent of pine and damp earth, focusing on the sounds around me. Then I heard it. A beautiful, melodious laughter, softer and brighter than the others. I opened my eyes. "That one." I pointed in the direction of the laughter. Kyle nodded, determination flooding his expression. "Let's go." Together, we threaded through the trees, moving deeper into the woods. The laughter guided us, leading me like a moth to a flame. Gradually, the darkness began to part, revealing a clearing bathed in translucent moonlight. In the center stood an enormous oak, its gnarled branches twisting upward, casting curious shadows. Beneath it, a small gathering of figures gathered, children with playful, innocent faces, but I sensed something dark beneath their charm. One stood apart, a girl with bright red ribbons in her hair and an unsettling smile that widened as she spotted us. "Welcome," she chimed, her voice sweet, yet layered with an unsettling echo. "You've come to play." We stepped forward cautiously. "What's your name?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Call me Penny," she said, tilting her head. "Are you ready for the game, Clara?" The whispers faded to an unsettling silence. The other children moved closer, their eyes glowing in the dim light. "Get back!" Kyle shouted, instinctively stepping in front of me. "What do you want?" Penny's laughter bubbled up again, sweet and tinkling, but it ebbed like the tide before crashing back with a malevolent undertone. "We only want to play. But you have to be special, Clara. It's your turn now." Before I could respond, the air shifted and I felt the ground shudder. Beneath us. I grabbed Kyle's arm, fear flooding my system.
We need to go, now. That's the fun of it, Penny giggled, and the shadow stirred behind her, writhing as if alive. You can't leave until the game is over. What game? I shouted, the accusations rising in my throat. What do we have to do? But before she could respond, the children erupted into laughter, their joyous yet manic clamor filling the air. Time to join us! In that moment, every piece of warning I had heard clicked into place. They weren't just children. Their eyes were devoid of life, empty husks trapped within the game. The laughter began to vibrate around us, seeping into my bones, and I felt something pulling at my mind, whispering sweetly. Don't listen, Kyle yelled, fighting against the tide of sounds that began to swell in response to Penny's call. Find the leader. I focused on Penny. You're just playing with us, aren't you? Her grin widened. Aren't we all just playing? Something deep within me snapped. I lunged forward, slicing through the unnatural laughter, the mirrors of reality beginning to crack. The children stepped back, almost startled. I could see confusion and irritation creeping into their features. Stop this, I shouted, desperation fueling my voice. This isn't a game. Penny faltered, that sweet smile fading for the briefest moment. You don't know what you're saying. I know that you want more than just to play, I cried, my heart racing. You want to trap us, but we won't let you. You can't have me. The shadows flickered around me, flickering between dark and light, and for a heartbeat I felt a shift. A whirl of energy surged, snapping at the edges of my awareness. Penny's giggles transformed into a growl. You shouldn't have said that. Now you'll take her place. The energy surged so violently that the ground twisted beneath me, sending Kyle and me spinning across the clearing. I fought against the pull, grabbing before I lost grip of my own reality. Fight against it, Kyle yelled, holding on to me with all his strength. And just like that, the laughter morphed into tears of frustration, a cacophony of voices clashing with one another, a storm brewing precariously. Clara, you have to break their hold! With a burst of adrenaline, I focused every ounce of my will into pushing back against the wave of shadows. I envisioned freedom, clarity, the moment of breaking through the facade. Rallying my strength, I faced the darkness holding Penny captive. My voice steadied as I shouted, deeper and clearer this time. You don't control me. This isn't just a game. I choose how I play. The shadows recoiled, murmurs buzzing in confusion, and I felt a sharp crack beneath me. Light split the darkness, my voice shattering their illusions. For the first time, I deciphered the fear in the children's eyes. Let her go! Kyle shouted, pulling me closer as the shadows dissolved, torn apart by the strength of will in the air. Suddenly, with a last horrifying wail, Penny fell to her knees, and the others began to retreat. They glanced back with remnants of confusion, their laughter dying away as they vanished into the depth of the darkness, shadows dissipating out of existence. I dropped to my knees, gasping for air, feeling the remnants of their whispers fade from my mind. Kyle was beside me, trembling but alive. Did we do it? He asked, the question hanging like a delicate thread between us. We broke their hold, I managed to reply, still reeling from the chaos. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. The glimmers of unease hung in the air, a hint of something left unresolved. As we started to rise, I recalled the mirage of their laughter echoing in the woods. Even now, it felt like they were watching us in the shadows. Clara, Kyle murmured, facing me. Are we really safe? I glanced back toward the clearing, knowing that lurking dread might never fully dissipate. In that moment, I felt it, a bittersweet freedom mingled with uncertainty. We had escaped the immediate danger, the thrill of survival still racing in our veins, yet the ghosts of unanswered questions lingered in the air. We left the woods behind, but the ache of that twisted game remained, echoing through the neighborhood like a distant drum. I wouldn't be returning to the life I once knew. I could feel their eyes lingering still, whispering faintly, patiently waiting out of sight. I looked at Kyle, resolute in my decision. It wasn't over. Not yet.